I've been following Fay Jackson for quite a while, and I'm sure we're all very excited to have Fay with us here today. I'm just going to do a little intro, and Fay's going to share lots of her perspectives here with us, perspectives on leadership. Fay is the founder of Vision in Mind and is the General Manager of Inclusion at Flourish Australia. Fay's had a very colourful background, has done lots of roles and is very accomplished. Fay was the inaugural Deputy Commissioner for the New South Wales Mental Health Commission, and was a director also for a mental health service in Sydney as well, and has published lots of papers, of which I've really enjoyed reading since 2016 when I was introduced to some of your work, Fay. And Fay has won awards for her work and has featured on the ABC programs and panels and questions and answers, and has also sparked a record number of tweets and emails to the ABC. So Fay, we are absolutely thrilled to have you with us today, and your keynote's in a relatively comfy style, so I'm just going to ask you some questions, and you're going to yarn to us. So first of all, you tell us a little bit about yourself, perhaps more personal, who you are, or just some background that we haven't covered in your bio, and a little bit about your experiences.
Okay, thank you. So I live on Bundjalung Nation land, and I want to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and give my undertaking to do all that I can to improve the lives of people with who are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, especially if they have lived experience as well, and hope that the future will be a whole lot better than it has been in the past for them. And I'm a mother, a grandmother. I have two biological daughters, and I had 4 inherited daughters, but I now have 3. One of the eldest of my inherited daughter. I inherited 4 daughters after my best friend died from breast cancer, and she asked me to take care of her girls, or be the mother figure in their lives. And we lost the eldest, Holly, about 9 years ago now. So my other daughters have lived experience, and so does one of my grandsons, but I never speak as a carer advocate. I think it's really important that we keep those 2 roles separate, because otherwise you end up compromising both the people with lived experience and people with care experience if you try and play 2 roles, because often those roles can have differences of opinion on what people need. So I had my first job, my first permanent role as a peer worker in the public system when I was 40. I had been told, some of the people listening will have already heard this, and I apologise if you have, but I had been told that I would never work, and that the words were, you'll never work and you'll never be a valuable member of society. And I bought into that diagnosis and that outlook for my life and believed it. And it was a peer worker who really gently, beautifully and compassionately challenged me on that in hospital. And she said to me in the way that only a peer worker can, I think, in a compassionate challenge, she said to me, Fay, I've got that same diagnosis as you, and I work. And I contribute to my community and my family. I pay my bills. I have a mortgage. I do all of that with that same diagnosis as you. So why can't you do that? And she went further then, and she said, and in fact, what gives you the right not to do it when you can? So that was like a light bulb moment for me, you know, like it was a gentle and loving sort of smack across the face about buying into the other people's rhetoric rather than building my own narrative for my own life, and stop seeing myself as a victim, and start to claim what I can do, including utilizing my lived experience purposefully and strategically in everything that I do. So I still consider myself to be a peer worker, although my title is General Manager of Inclusion and I'm one of the executive members of Flourish Australia. I still consider myself to be a peer worker and will always do that. It's just that I'm a peer worker working at a different level, and I still, in almost every conversation that I'm involved in, find a reason to use my lived experience very strategically and purposefully in everything that I say, always with a view that the personal is the political, and what I'm saying is about furthering, improving the lives of people with lived experience as individuals and as our community. You know, we are a very vital lived experience community, and we can draw on our lived experience community to support us in hours of need, but we also need to claim our leadership in driving positive change in services, in our communities, in our family. Every one of us, not just people that have got the title of leadership in their role, every one of us, including peer workers at the front line, we can all be leaders in the space that we're in at that time.
Wow, Fay, thank you so much. That was a wonderful introduction to who you are as a person, and a wonderful introduction to your perspectives. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to give you your first, another question. First, a very leadership focused question. I know you've already sort of given us a bit of an intro into that, but can you tell us a little bit more about how you understand lived experience leadership? What is it to you, and why do you think we might need to redefine it?
Well, to me, it's my duty. And I would really like everybody else to see it as their duty. You know, I think that duties are really important. What we do that has meaning and purpose in it is really important. And we all have different ways, different strengths that we can utilize in our roles and in our life to be the kind of leader that I can offer. You know, you can be the kind of leader that you can offer. You know, it's whatever that we have, we utilize it. And I think that it's really important to understand that what may have traditionally been seen as a leader needs to be seen differently, I think, from now on, particularly for people and about people with lived experience. I think that we need to change the narrative around what is a leader. And I'm a very emotional person. I cry really easily. But that's a really common trait of people that have been subject to really severe trauma. And I didn't actually know that until I learned a lot more about trauma. And I'm also a person who thinks about, you know, I have really dark thoughts every day. But it's still, I think a leader is about, well, I get up and do it anyway. You know, it's not just about me. I have this role, and I've always lived by these a few sayings, and I've brought my daughters up on them, and they are, you know, a life lived in fear is a life half lived. And if I'm afraid of the weak, what traditionally has been seen weak in me, I may not step up to the mark, you know. But I think that if we use what is traditionally seen as weaknesses, like vulnerability, fragility, emotion, that kind of thing, if we use them in the service of others, they are actually amazing strengths. And I hear young people say now, which I love hearing, that their lived experience, their fragility, their vulnerability, when used to connect with people and used in leadership to show that there's a different way that we can communicate and be leaders and build our community and make change, then that I've heard them saying that it's a superpower. And I really love that. I don't know that I can go so far as saying that about myself. But that's probably something else that, you know, I'll probably jump around a little bit here, but that's probably something else that we should consider too. I probably can't see myself as having superpowers because I have such strong imposter anxiety, you know. And when I say imposter anxiety, I mean that there's a constant chatter in my head, which is happening now too, about this isn't good, you know, they should have got somebody else. What have you got to say that's important? You know, somebody else should have done this. Somebody else that's watching this has got a lot more to say than of importance than what you have, Faye. You know, like I've got that constant chatter. And sometimes, of course, the voices are really at me saying, you know, they swear, they don't hold back, you know, and they tell me that what I'm saying is shit. And they just carry on and tell me to shut up and get off and, you know, that kind of thing. It's about just doing it anyway. You know, you've got all that kind of negative rhetoric about your value and purpose, but just if you give it in the service of others, it is valuable. It is leadership. It can make change and bring about hope, and can help show people that although they may not feel resilient, they are resilient. They just keep going. What you feel isn't fact. There's a great advocate, Gwen Scottman, who her answer machine says, part of the message says, go by what you know, not by what you feel. Because so often what we feel can be a really negative take on life and on our capabilities, you know. So I do walk with this constant chatter about not being good enough, and having that constant imposter anxiety. But I think that that's something that leaders should share too, so that people who have those thoughts and feelings about themselves, their own value, can go, right, well, she does that, even though she has those thoughts and feelings, so maybe I can too. Yeah. I remember I gave a talk, it was the international, oh dear, what was it? Anyway, it was the IMHL, and I've just forgotten what that means, but it's an international mental health conference in Sydney, and a few years back. And at that conference, when I gave that keynote, it was the first time that I'd ever said in public that I actually think about suicide on a daily basis, and I do. And I've since learned that that is also a very common thought and feeling of people who've been subject to really severe trauma. And after I said that in public, so I was a deputy commissioner at the time, and I thought, surely they're not going to lock me up for saying it this time, you know, surely they're not going to drag, you know, come in their white coats and drag me off the stage and lock me up again, you know, and they didn't. But what did happen was lots of people with lived experience came up to me afterwards and said, and I was crying when I was talking about that, and they said that they thought about suicide on a daily basis too, and that they thought they could never work any higher than a position that they were working, which was peer worker positions or whatever, or not working yet, because they had that thought every day. And my response is, well, then you're very much the person that should be stepping up to a leadership role so that you can connect with others who have that kind of experience, and you can build in them a belief in themselves, you know, help them to show that those thoughts and feelings shouldn't stop us. We've got so much value to add, even when we have those thoughts and feelings, and even when we're hearing voices, even when we're, you know, being consumed by anxiety, just do it anyway, you know, just keep going.
It's fantastic, Fay. I'd like to pick up on the point that you're making, because we chatted on Zoom the other day, and we spoke about being emotional and how some people may perceive or make out that to be a weakness. But I always comment that the day that I can't feel anything, and I'm not emotional and angry about what's going on in the world or what's happened to me, then maybe I'll stop, you know, being involved in the mental health sector, because I think you do need to feel that. But this leads into the question that I wanted to ask you. So obviously, I've got some questions that I'm dying to ask you.
Yeah.
With the experiences that you had, say a barrage of voices, or these emotional feelings, and being in a leadership role, because it is enormously difficult. I mean, even just doing public speaking, and I myself, when I'm speaking, I'm hearing certain things and just trying to carry on. So there's obviously lots of skills and passion and commitment, you know, keeps you focused in your roles. What do you think, I guess my question is about, what are the key differences between leadership and what's beautiful about lived experience leadership? Can you just give us a few differences? Because some people might be thinking one way, and we could maybe flesh out why lived experience leadership is.
Yeah, I think that traditionally leaders are seen as people who you know, are very strong and resilient and charismatic and inspiring and intelligent and strategic, visionary, and, you know, just powerful. And I think that those things are also present in lived experience leadership, for sure, but we've also a value add in that we have all of those things, but we also know that those things that I spoke about before, being vulnerable, feeling fragile, is actually where the connections are really made with people. You know, people relate to you more when they can see that you're vulnerable, you've shared that you are vulnerable, you have a vulnerability, and that kind of gives them permission to go forward and see themselves as leaders anyway. I think good leaders know that they lead from in front, but they also lead. There are times, many times, when they shouldn't be leading from front. They should be leading from beside or behind. I remember when I was working in the public system, I started work as a peer worker. My first permanent role was when I was 40, and it was a 2-day-a-week peer worker role in psych wards. And then within 2 months, I was working full-time. And within 2 years, I'd become a manager. And I was the only peer worker, I think, when I started. Oh, no, there was one other. But we had, within 2 years, we had 8 peer workers, which back then, 25 years ago or so, that was unheard of, you know, 8 peer workers in a public system, and still unheard of in most public systems nowadays, which is a terrible shame. And one that us as leaders need to do all that we can to make that change come about, so that we have as many peer workers working in the public system as there are nurses or clinicians of other kinds, because we really are incredibly valuable in those kind of situations. But while I was in that role as director, I needed to hire another staff member. And when the panel that I put together to hire this new staff member spoke to me after we had interviewed her, they said to me, 2 of the people said to me, "Do you really want to hire her, Fay, because she has degrees that you don't have?" Because I left school when I was young, and I hadn't reached year 12, you know, and I quit in the first week back of year 11. I just couldn't deal with it. I was hearing voices a lot, and I just couldn't do it. So they asked me, you know, you don't have any degrees or anything. This person does. You know, she may usurp you. She may end up taking your role. And I said, fantastic. You know, if she's better than me, that's exactly the person I should be hiring. You know, you don't try and hire people to be less than you. You know, that's, if you do that, you're thinking about yourself. You're not thinking about our community or our movement. You know, the good leaders always have the focus on their community and their service or whatever it is that they have influence in. You know, it's not about me. It's about my work. It's about the people that I'm trying to advocate for. It's about our community. It's about our movement. It's about our service, not me. So a good leader is selfless too. Certainly, we do have to take care of ourselves. I absolutely agree with that. We do need to not burn ourselves out. And that title, that thing that people say, or a title that people give, a tireless worker or a tireless leader, I think I've been exhausted for 25 years, you know. So I find that term really laughable, because inevitably leaders who are leading with real values, the values that peers, that our movement, our community value, then they're exhausted because they're pushing, they keep trying to make change, you know. And it's been hard. Look, I remember back when I first started, I had my tires slashed, I was assaulted because I was doing my work, not by people with mental health issues. I was actually tweaked on the end of the nose by a psychiatrist who told me that I should be being locked up in seclusion and restraint rather than doing the work that I was doing, you know. Wow. And I've had death threats for years, except the last couple of years I haven't had, which has made me question whether I'm doing my job well anymore, you know. So it's been tough, but you just keep turning up and you encourage the other people that you know to claim their roles as leaders as well, because they have strengths that I don't have. And we all need each other to be a full leadership, you know, for everyone to play their role in changing the services, changing the attitudes towards people with lived experience, changing the community and bringing positive change in their families as well.
Beautiful. I was going to ask you a question about what some of your example of some challenges were, but I think you've answered some of that there. I think having your tires slashed and death threats would be more than challenging. Perhaps you could give us, do you have a highlight in a leadership role that has really stayed with you that you could share with us?
Yeah, I have for sure. But I would like to go back to that because there's a bit more about that I would like to.
Certainly.
I think that probably the hardest, although I've had death threats and everything, that they actually didn't worry me that much, you know, which is really wonderful. I feel like I was kind of protected from worrying about. I guess that's something about not having such a love affair with life that other people have, that makes you not so worried about death threats, you know. But what has been for me actually the hardest thing about being seen as a leader, it has been the lateral violence that I've experienced from other people with lived experience. That's really hard. That is really difficult. And sometimes the very people who should be standing beside you, supporting you, to give what you have to give, along with what they have to give, added together, is much stronger. Yet sometimes they'll do everything they can to bring you down, the tall poppy syndrome, you know. Like I remember I used to be told, or you know, committees that I was going to go on to or whatever would be told by people with lived experience that I wasn't a real consumer. I don't use that word anyway, but you know, that was the word that was used back then. Not a real consumer because look at the way she dresses and, you know, she wears red lipstick and, you know, all of that kind of thing. So you just can't be taken down by that stuff. You just need to keep going. It is really hard, but there are great people I know. You know, there are people I can see in the chat that are here today, like Tim Heffernan. When, you know, when things get really hard for me, Tim will get a call, you know, and he supports me and builds me up again and says, you know, you can do this, sister, you can keep going, you know. And Paula Arrow, there are lots of people that I can call that know what it's like to experience that kind of lateral violence, and who say to me, you know, but it's okay, keep going. And I've come to realize that any marginalized community will dole out that kind of lateral violence. But I think that we're getting to a place now in the movement where that is starting to die down, where it's actually the love and support of each other which is really starting to dominate now, which and that's showing our emotions and talking about love and talking about the things that make us feel fragile and everything are actually strengths, you know. And the rhetoric, the narrative that's being used is changing, you know, to things like love and support and working with, standing by, rather than claiming I'm a leader. You know, we're all leaders. We just need to recognize it and claim that. Highlights. There are so many.
So many, right?
So many, and really big ones too. Like we got the peer worker hub up on the New South Wales Mental Health Commission, which is a wonderful resource for people getting peer workers happening in their service. In Flourish Australia, probably there's a few really big ones there. I conceived of and led on our Why Not a Peer Worker strategy, which was where every position that was to be advertised, frontline position, was to be advertised as a peer worker position, first of all. And only then, if it couldn't be filled as a peer worker, they could re-advertise and ask for mental health workers. So our peer worker numbers went from 22 part-time peer workers when I started at Flourish to 147 within 12 months, FTE, full-time equivalents. And we now have 250 or something like that, and intend to keep growing it, you know. And that's
your details there is wonderful.
Yeah, that's been an example then to other services. We've shown other services that are big lived experience stuff. You know, we don't just have the peer workers. Over 60% of our over 1,000 staff identify as having lived experience. And then there are another large percentage of people that identify as having care experience. So we really have shown that having a large workforce of lived experience staff is a plus. It's a real bonus, you know. So being able to show that the things that I thought would work do work has been a really big highlight. So things like also the writing of our co-design guidelines. In one of our accountabilities in those guidelines talks about it lists who might be the stakeholders, and some of the people in the co-design group wanted things like people from other dimensions and other galaxies, because that is their real experience, you know. And we managed to get that included in the guidelines. There is a footnote to explain why that was so important, because it's about co-design is about not meetings afterwards. You don't have meetings afterwards in co-design. You have them there, you put it all out there, and then that's what goes down on the paper. And that shows real respect and real inclusion when people have said they want you know, the people that they see and hear that other people can't see and hear, included as stakeholders. That shows that we respect you, you know. So they've been really big things for me. But I think probably some of the little things have been as important. I remember a gentleman, when I was giving a keynote in Tasmania, this gentleman came up and was talking to me afterwards. And I asked him, I just got a really strong feeling that he might need a hug. And I asked him if he did. And he said, what? What did you say? And I said, would you like a hug? And he said, did you just ask me if I'd like a hug? Do you mean a cuddle? And I said, yeah, that's right. Would you like a cuddle? And he said, yeah, I would. Really tall man, you know. So I stretched up and gave him a cuddle, but he came down on me, his head down onto my shoulder, and he started sobbing. And he hadn't had, it still makes me upset, he hadn't had a cuddle for 30 years since his mum had died. Like, you know, that's incredible and so sad. And that, you know, being able to be there for someone, to experience something like that again, and then to keep in contact and help them to change the narrative around their life and the way they're living their life, that's really big. So for me, the little, what people might see as little things, the individual, one soul, one life is as important as, you know, a really large strategic issue that you're dealing with. And, you know, I hug people everywhere. I'm a cuddly person, and whether they're homeless or whatever, I do that, you know, and that's something that I think is in leadership, you know, to share love and care. I think that's good leadership, you know. Yeah.
I think we often forget to cite, don't we, in all the classic leadership skills that we often see listed in articles and research and the things that we talk about. We often do miss kindness.
Yeah.
I don't know, somewhere along the way, we focus on other wonderful things like empathy and compassion and lived experience, but kindness is really important. And there are ways some people can be empathetic, but actually not very kind. You can actually, they're quite different, aren't they? And some people can be empathetic and kind, and some people can be very kind, but they don't have any empathy. So kindness is actually very special, and I think, well, what you're talking about is, well, would highlight you as a very kind person and very in touch. Yeah, that's lovely to hear.
Yeah,
that
I guess
those
I would see that. I
highlights.
guess I would sort of see that as empathy too. But
Yeah, oh
you
yeah,
know,
for sure.
yeah,
There's a blend.
Yeah, but kindness is absolutely. So I saw somebody wrote in the pandemic, we can't cuddle during the pandemic, sure, but that means then you'd actually need to go deeper in the conversations that you have with people. You actually need to open up more and be more giving and more receiving, so that in the words you're making up for the hug you don't have, you know, in your eyes, in the quietness of your voice or the gentleness in your voice or whatever, that needs to make up for those hugs. And we can do that. Not long ago, I had a really deep conversation with somebody who was in a terrible situation, suicidal. And I had to go down, I had to make myself go down into that space that she was in, so that I could connect with her when I couldn't connect with her physically. And we were actually doing it by phone, and it meant me being more present than if I could hold her, you know. So I think that's a really important thing. And I'm living in the land of the floods, so I live in the Northern Rivers, and we've been surrounded by mass trauma. And my daughter lost absolutely everything, and we lost our car and finances and things like that, but nothing like other people. And you know, when there's that mass trauma, something that's taught me is that all of the things that I thought were quirky things about my brain, about my not being able to remember things and different ways my brain works, and just standing, you know, with something in my hands, or and going, what was I to do with this? Or starting a sentence and then in the middle of the sentence forgetting completely what I was talking about, not being able to go back to it at all. I thought were just glitches in my brain, but now that I've seen mass trauma in people, I know that that's about trauma.
Yeah.
So that it's actually given me more confidence in a way to know that these quirks that we have in our brains and thinking about suicide daily and stuff like that, it's just normal. It's normal stuff for trauma. You know, I think we really need to stop seeing ourselves as these diagnoses. You know, I really worry about diagnosis. So this is controversial, but I do worry that diagnosis puts people in a box, and then they start to see themselves as that diagnosis rather than who they are actually, including their diagnosis, if that's what it takes.
Yeah.
Who they are and what they have to contribute. And we all can do that. In the council that I support, they're all people with lived experience, and I see them go from being people who can barely speak to, because they're so overwhelmed by their own lack of confidence or lack of worth, that they think they've got nothing of worth to say, to seeing them within just a few meetings of starting to realise that they've actually got really important things to say. And including if people are hearing voices and their voices are trying to shut them up, I just say to them, whatever you've got to say is important. We're just going to wait. You don't need to hurry. They don't need to hurry you. We want to hear what you have to say, so we'll just wait with you. And as soon as you say that, their voices seem to quiet down on people, and they're able to say what it is that they needed to say. So I think that's really important, that we don't rush people, that we're really with them, particularly if we can't give them a cuddle. And I don't think we should use cuddles so that we don't be really with people, if you know what I mean. So.
No, I think everyone is really feeling what you mean here, Fay. In terms of leadership, would you say then that with all the skills and all the things that make anyone a great leader, that perhaps I'm probably slightly leading with this question, but could lived experience actually just be a golden bar that really can create inherently a wonderful leader? And I do also want to ask you the second question, so I can just let you sort of go with that comment in the question. Can anyone lead? You know, because you've talked about all these wonderful qualities that you've experienced that you're proud of. Can lived experience actually be integral and just most useful for leadership? And can we all do that? How can we do that, Fay?
Yeah, well, I absolutely think everybody should claim their leadership. I think everybody can be, if they want to be, and even if they don't want to be, like the pew worker challenged me when I was, you know, clothed in victimhood. You know, what gives me the right not to, you know? So I actually do think that we all can, but we shouldn't compare ourselves to someone else. We just should bring what we have to the table, or to the keynote, or to the talk, or to the conversation with this one person, whatever, you know. If we're talking with one person in a leadership role there, it's not to lead the person, it's about leading them to recognize their own worth and value, you know, helping them see that, and leading them to recognize that there is hope for them in their lives. Recovery, so recovery is still a word that I have to use a lot because that's what services are still using. But, you know, it's a big question, recovery. Recovery infers that something's wrong. And I see people with lived experience like those beautiful kintsugi bowls, that Japanese craft and philosophy where they'll take a bowl that's been broken, or a jug or something like that that's been broken, and mend it with liquid gold. Like the glue is the liquid gold that joins it all back together again. And that vessel then is more valuable after it's been broken than before it was broken. And the value is in the cracks, you know, that's kintsugi. And I think that we are kintsugi vessels, you know, and that we have this incredible value, each one of us. And I'm talking about people who have dual disability or dual diagnosis or whatever, you know, if they have mental health issues and drug and alcohol issues, mental health issues, drug and alcohol issues, and intellectual disability, whatever. Everybody has something to give. And every community, like I saw in the floods, there was everybody, including people who, what clinicians would say were stark raving mad or whatever, you know, they wouldn't probably use that term, although some would, still doing their bit, you know, like still in there shoveling the mud and the sewage and, you know, supporting little children who've lost everything, and supporting, you know, bringing around food because they couldn't do something else, you know, they were sore backs or whatever. Everybody, absolutely everybody had to play their bit, because where we were, there were no emergency services. They'd all gone down to Lismore because they thought the flood was going to be huge there. It was, but it was also huge upstream where we were, and we had no emergency services. So every single person had to play their role, do their bit to save the people next door. The only people we could communicate were the people we were immediately near, because there was no phones, no internet, no electricity, no fuel for cars, no water, no food. There was nothing. We only had each other. That's all we had. And that's all that was needed. We saved thousands of lives, and our conversations that we have with one another who have lived experience, our conversations can save thousands of lives. They do. You know, you don't have to be a brain surgeon to change how a person's mind, how a person's brain works. Just a conversation helping them to have hope and see their value in their own lived experience, their own brokenness. That's life-saving. It absolutely is. Tim has saved my life. You know, Paula has, Gwen has, Janet, you know, conversations are powerful if we believe in them and connect to each other, really connect, then they are life-saving conversations. You know, it's very beautiful. It's hard and deep, and it's very beautiful. Something that I do find really difficult in my roles is that very often people think that I only have my lived experience to offer. They forget that I've been working in this field for 30 years or whatever, and that I've got a lot of practical and career value to add as well. So we really need to help people to step up the mark to say, hey, like, it's not just my lived experience. I've got this experience. I've been a manager. I've been this, you know, I know about what happened when they introduced activity-based funding in mental health. I know what happened when they introduced NDIS. I know, you know, like I know what makes a workforce of lived experience work. I know what it makes to make peer workers feel powerful, but not powerful over other people, powerful in what they have to offer that can make the world a better place. I know how to write a good policy and a good framework, and, you know, I know all of those things. It's not just my lived experience, but my lived experience does inform almost everything that I do. because the personal is the political, and we need to know how to strategically use that in everything that we do.
Absolutely. Fay, that is a great explanation. And I love that phrase too. I think it was Jackie Dillon has said that in many, the personal is political, and you can't separate the two. Anyone that says, oh, that's just political, it doesn't affect me personally, I think we need to perhaps unpack things a bit, because something political does affect us personally. The two are almost inseparable, and I noticed you've said it twice, and I say that saying a lot too, and it's incredibly powerful, and it's wonderful for this session, because when we talk about lived experience leadership, there is a lot of politics in that, isn't there, Fay? And we can't avoid some of that. Can I ask you, how can we support people of lived experience to move into leadership roles? How can we support organizations, public sector, private sector, initiatives, charity? How do we really support lived experience strategically, practically? Give us a few pointers, because you would have a lot of experience in this.
Yeah. So I think it goes back to not just moving into leadership experiences, back like what I'm saying, that whatever position you're in, see it as a leadership position, you know. So you're a peer worker, see it as a leadership position. You can lead change right there where you are, you know. So I think that that's a big part of it. However, services do need to employ people with lived experience in designated lived experience roles.
Absolutely.
Throughout the whole level. So at Flourish, there's a person with lived experience, Paula Hanlon, on the board, you know, an amazing advocate in the public system, has been she was around before I was, you know, so amazing person. She's there on the board level. Then I'm at the executive level, and we do have other people, of course, on the board and in the executive that have lived experience, but they're not in designated roles. Designated roles are powerful because it is a requirement of designated roles to use their lived experience purposefully in those roles. It's very different. I would much rather, if we talk about clinical services, I would much rather have a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a psych nurse support me who had lived experience, absolutely. But their roles are still different to a designated lived experience role as a consumer advocate or a peer worker or whatever. They have been taught, first of all, that they have to work in certain standards, certain ways, certain values, certain forms, all of that kind of thing. First of all, so they are taught that first and foremost, they are psychologists, psychiatrists, psych nurses, whatever. Peer workers and people in designated lived experience roles, first of all, they are kintsugi. They are the people who have been broken, who bring that beauty and that strength, that new value to the roles. And they are that, all of that brokenness, that beautiful brokenness is out there front and center. That's the purpose of it, you know. And that's that purpose is to connect, build bridges between understanding or non-understanding and understanding in services, build bridges in relationships, build bridges from people to their confidence, or even if they still have, which I do, absolutely, you know, imposter anxiety. I'm not a confident person. People say I'm really confident and really relaxed when I do. I'm not. Like, if you could only hear the chatter that's going on in my head about how terrible this is, you know, like it's difficult to live with, you know, but it's in a lived experience role. That's what you bring, and that is what's powerful, and that is what's beautiful. We've got to stop seeing fragility and vulnerability as weakness. It isn't. when we use it as a connector, as something that brings understanding, it's incredibly powerful. I remember, you know, I was sexually abused as a child, really severely, very young. And, you know, even now at this age now, I'm really paying for that physically. And it's really hard to live with. It's hard to have lived with it all my life. And that's why I've thought about suicide on a daily basis. But it is just a thought. It isn't something that's necessary, and I won't do it. But it's about bringing all of that and offering it in the service of others, the service of your service to bring about positive change, the service of your family to bring about positive change, the service to an individual to support them to bring about their positive change, you know. So it's there all the time. Designated lived experience roles at all levels of the service bring about really positive change, and they spread hope and they spread pride. You know, they spread the recognition of the valuing of lived experience throughout all of the staff. And that's when you get real change, when all staff recognize the value of lived experience, not just the people with lived experience. But very often those of us with lived experience recognize it after other people do, you know. So, but that's what's really important, I think. So, and, you know, I read this, that saying, you know, be the change that you would like to see. And also those questions, you know, if not you, who? Who's going to do this if not you? And if not now, then when? When is it going to be done? And if not here, where you work, where I work, if not here, wherever we are, where? Where is it going to be done? It's our responsibility to own that. If not me, who? If not now, when? If not where? If not here, where? You know, I mean, we do need to ask those questions. If I can't bring about the changes that I need to bring about here now, then maybe I do need to look for somewhere else to do that, you know. So, but that's okay then. If you can answer that and go, right, well, then it's going to be there. If I cannot bring it about here, then maybe somebody else will be able to. So I'll get out of the way and go and do that there so that the other person can come in and do what I couldn't do, you know. Sometimes that does work that way. So, but you always have a responsibility. And I wish I could say that it was the responsibility that I have to my family that has kept me alive. But to be honest, it's not that. Because the way my head works a lot is that I think my family would be better off without me. You know, like I have so much physical ill health, and I have so much, you know, I've had so much mental anguish and the depression and the suicidality and all of that stuff. You know, the voices and the psychosis and the severe anxiety, you know, and I think, oh, my family would be so much better off without this in their lives. I should leave them so that they can get on with their lives, you know. But of course, that's anybody who's worked in the post-suicide space knows that family never get over it. You know, I lost my brother, I lost my daughter, and you never get over it, you know. So I won't be doing that, you know. So I think that's, you know, we just need to bring everything that who we are, because who we are and what we've experienced is valuable if we offer it in leadership, but if we offer it in everything that we do to bring about positive change, then it's a very beautiful thing, fragile, connecting, beautiful thing.
It's so powerful what you're sharing with us, Fay. So powerful. I can see little hearts and hands floating up the screen beside me. That's beautiful. I think everybody is feeling the same. I think you really touch everybody when you speak, and that is evident why you're such a good leader for the lived experience sector as well, but as a gorgeous human. And this really ties together because we only have a few minutes left, Fay, so we'll start wrapping up. But I just clutching at a few things that you said that really encompass a lot of your message, is that those lovely sayings that you were saying, you know, if not now, when, if not you, who, if not here, where, perhaps that we've all got this obligation to be our authentic self, whether that's you know, vulnerabilities, weaknesses, and all, in everything that you've spoken about, to be authentic, to be confident that that's who we are and that's valuable, to move in leaders in our own families, leaders in our own communities, in our own environments. And maybe one question for you at the end, would you say that the sector in general, so I'm not talking about people in role, you know, structures and systems, and perhaps our field of very biologically based psychiatry, could really help us by finding the value in what is often seen as weak and vulnerable, finding the value in lived experience, because that seems to be such a powerful message that I always get from you. This is valuable, use it.
Yeah, absolutely. I know with the up at Hervey Bay, we have a service up there. Flourish has a service up there, and the clinicians working in the public system up there have told us that their well-being has never been so good, because our peer workers have shown them that having lived experience isn't just a negative thing. You know, they've shown them that it's a positive thing, and that people with lived experience can support other people. And they've said that they really love that they now know that they've got somewhere else that they can send people instead of slamming them in hospital, you know, and that helps them to feel a lot better themselves. So, which is a really beautiful thing. It's really important that we always, those of us with lived experience who are working in designated lived experience roles, always stay peer. We must stay to our values. We must not allow ourselves to be colonized by the clinical talk. We mustn't start using clinical words. Words are powerful. And if we start using clinical words, we change the nature of the relationship that we're having with the people. And we also can start, without recognizing it, we can start to be colonized, and we can start to become part of a coercive practice by saying things like to people like, you know, if you take your medication, you won't be put into seclusion and restraint. Now that may be true, but it does change the nature. You know, it's best to be asking a person.
The co-option of peer work, isn't it, Fay?
Right.
And do you know what? I'm going to stop us there, because I could do this all day. I would just, if I could wave a wand right now, I'd freeze everybody, and we could all just stay in the symposium forever and just chat. It's just wonderful hearing you speak, and I think everybody has gotten so much value out of this. I'm devastated to start wrapping us up, but we've literally got about a minute left. But your messaging, Fay, I think has really gotten through to everyone, because I've also been trying to watch the little chat as well. And people are just, really reacting. And I'm sure that if you could hear clapping, can we all pretend we're doing a bit of click? Let's see some claps come up, emojis. Do people know how to use their emoji? Thank you, everybody. Look at all your claps, Fay.
Can I just say there, somebody says, don't underestimate the allies. I love allies. We need allies. I love them. I appreciate them so much. There are wonderful allies who are clinicians as well. You know, there is a shift. I can see this shift change happening now, and we need the allies so much. And you know, a good service is like an orchestra. It's made up of all these different instruments played by different musicians. There's not 30 musicians playing 30 violins, all different, all working together, and our allies are really essential to recognising the value of lived experience.
Thank you. All right. Oh, I'm getting that right. We've got to stop because of I've got my timer on, Fay. I'm trying we've got to keep to time. Thank you, Fay, so much. And everybody, we will see you on the other side.